You've joined us for for Snyk Live, talking and delving into the world of PHP. And I'm joined here today by James Seconde from the Vonage Developer Relations crew. So hello again, James.
Hi, Steve. Hello. Oh, that was my green screen doing something weird. Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Hello. Wow, that was an embarrassing start, but this is fine. This is fine. I should switch to my "this is fine" scene. Oh, there it is. Which is I normally keep for production, like deployments on Fridays, but yeah, I'll use it for this one now. This is fine. No, thank you for joining. Yeah, you never deploy to production on Fridays. Otherwise, this is fine. You know that. It's an old rule. Anyways, thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to have you here today and to geek out. Maybe let's start with a little bit of your background, because I did actually say it all at the start, but I was on mute, so only I heard. And anyway, yeah. But if you want to start with your background a little bit, that would be amazing.
Yeah, sure. Sure. One of the things that I always find fun about people in the developer relations space is lots of people's backgrounds tend to be very varied. So I graduated with a degree in English literature and theatre, and my sort of major thing was theatre. So I'm a trained actor, and my dissertation was on stand-up comedy. So, a natural kind of software engineering background, really. But I was always into computers and stuff. It comes from like my grandfather, who got like a Commodore 64, and we inherited his Spectrum ZX, and I just would always sort of, much to my parents' dismay, pretty much take it apart. And when they got a PC, they got a 486, and I just like basically hack Windows to pieces. So I was always into that, but theatre was always going to be my career. So I went to London, joined a theatre. I was the technical manager, did a bit of stage work and stuff, but took a temp job, which was a load of like SQL QA, and it just sort of built, and the balance sort of like tipped. And I was like, I think my career probably needs, the pay, tech versus fringe theatre in the edge of London. Had to make a choice, wasn't too hard. So I went full stack dev, and I was a full stack engineer for about sort of like 6-7 years. But yeah, my background with all the theatre stuff and doing like writing and things like that basically just led to developer relations, really. When I left London, I moved to Birmingham, bumped into various people like Jess Rose and Mike Elsmore, who just said, "Do you realise this is what you do?" and pushed me into the Devrel space, and here I am.
I think that's interesting. Like, I think Devrel in particular, it's funny you should mention that. Oh, and shout out to the amazing Jess and Mike. Hello, if you're watching. Or if anyone knows them, just reach out, say hi. They're amazing folks, do really cool stuff. But yeah, I think Devrel, you nailed Devrel there, because Devrel is that thing that finds you. I always find there's always someone that reaches out and go, "Oh, that community work you're doing, or you know that presentation you're doing." Like, people will hire you, and you get to geek out, which is really cool.
Yeah, I just did it because I thought it was a done thing. I mean, I'm a product of I'm basically a creation of the PHP meetup scene, really. From thinking like, I want to do full stack dev. I don't know what language I want to do. And I just, threw the dartboard, and at that time it was PHP. So my company started sending me they sent me to an agency called Invika, which at the time were heavily symphony based. In fact, they had quite a few sort of core people around the kind of symphony community, like Kieran McNulty and John Acker and people like that. And that's how I sort of got into it. But when I moved to Birmingham, the Birmingham meetup, the PHP meetup had kind of died a bit because you always have these kind of life cycles. So I created it, and that's why sort of at the end of it, people are like, you do realize that if you like start a meetup and you run one, you're doing community work, which is like something that people will pay you to do. And I'm like, I didn't know that. So there you go.
Yeah, it's totally something. And actually, again, funny you should mention it, but I actually have had Devrel presenter training before in the US, one of the previous companies I worked for. And it was the team that trained, the speaker training team that trained the Google Devrel folks. And it was actually, they were actually an ad-lib comedy troupe. So, yeah. It's funny how those like two go hand in. I mean, we're charismatic speakers, right? That's what Devrel are.
I try to be. I try. I think it's really. I think you get really sort of interesting. Like Devrel tends to be. You have to work your audience a little bit. If you're in quite a sort of a super serious crowd, then you need to tone down your sort of your engagement and your entertainment and sort of ramp up the engineering. And if you're sort of not, I mean, one of the things that So one sort of comment on Twitter that I found that was hilarious was Emily Freeman, and she was getting the usual kind of non-male speaker feedback that one gets, which is usually uncalled for, and it was what the hell is this? I came to see serious sort of like serious programming, not a comedy show, and she was like, I will take that, thank you very much, sir. Which I thought was great because she is very funny.
I think that's one of the things I really love about particularly, well, not just the PHP conferences, but conferences, the open source conferences in general, is people will also bandy around to like help if someone's demo doesn't work or a computer fails. And my favorite one is actually from PHP Australia in 2015. My good friend Ben Deckerai was doing it was actually a vulnerability hacking virus writing in PHP demo. Rasmus was in the audience, and it actually ended up wiping 3 computers before he got it working. But everyone was pitching in to try and help like get this code working, and even Rasmus got up and was like, "Oh, did you try this?" And yeah, it was. I always love that.
Yeah, some of the kind of camaraderie that you get. I mean, I for instance, I started going to conferences first, and PHP conferences and JavaScript conferences and some DevOps ones that I've been to tend to be the your kind of hoodie wearing millennial kind of crowd, as opposed to sort of like sometimes like Java and .NET-y, which is a few more business casual, sort of smart suits and things like that. So you do get that kind of hackathon-y feel in PHP with it. And I didn't know this really until I started experiencing the kind of wider tech scene. But I'd never experienced hackathons until that point. And it was really when I started getting involved in, it was when my team at the Fusion meetup started getting involved in things like Hack the Midlands. It's a local one to Birmingham in the UK where I am. And another one of our team ran CovHack, which is for Coventry nearby, and I really got to experience the actual hackathon space. And I just thought, this is awesome. Why don't more sort of general sort of devs know about this? I think that there's a commercial devs that have got into the sort of a classic computer science path and things like that. And I didn't know that any of this was kind of available. And yeah, you get that kind of amazing camaraderie and a lot of fun as well. A lot of like the games and stuff that they play, like the hacking games. I haven't actually tried to take on Battle Snake yet, but I have watched. I've watched Joe Nash and Gary Hokins try and take it on.
Joe is amazing too. Like I met him. We worked together at PayPal many years ago. And also that I know Mike Elsmore. I know him from BattleHack, which we're running before. Like he was in the World Finals in 2014. Yeah,
I didn't know that. The reason why I moved to Birmingham was I needed to move out of London because I wanted to buy a house, and London's mad. And I didn't realize it, and I wasn't going into the Devrel direction, but I was heavily community focused. But when I moved here, it turned out that there's this sort of core contingent of, there's Mike Elsmore here, and obviously there's Jess Rose as well. We've also got Stuart Langridge, who would say he's not really developer relations, but sort of teeters onto the edge of it. and you've got Bruce Lawson, who's probably one of the sort of the OGs of developer relations. And it's all there's about sort of 5 of us that are sort of, you know, regularly sort of pop up into the pub together, go to the same meetups. And it's quite interesting that we're all here. I think it's quite unusual for a non-tech hub city. I wonder if like Liverpool or Manchester or Bristol or something has the same kind of thing. I don't know. Well, I know Bristol was heavily involved in the hackathon scene stuff. There's quite a few. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to do a bit of a segue. But if you've just joined us, you've joined myself, Developer Steve, and James Seconde from Vonage on Snyk Live. If you do have any questions, comments, emojis, or anything at all, please pop it into one of the chats, either on, if you're watching us via Twitch or on YouTube, just pop it into the chat, and we always love to see that. So, and hello to those people that have now said hello. No, it's definitely an amazing scene, and I love that you described yourself as being a product of those communities, sort of emerging through through those user groups, through those meetups. Because I think in some degree or regard, we're all products of open source in some way, and like it totally speaks to that. What's the most left field thing you've ever built or seen at a meetup that has been built using the PHP framework?
Damn, because when you started that sentence, you said the most left field thing you'd seen at a meetup. So and I just thought, I know what it is, and it's not in PHP, but I was running Brum PHP, and I chose this talk, and it was a CTO of a company here. And when I ran the PHP user group in Birmingham, I tended to get a lot other aligned things. Like, so we'd have like a JS talk mixed in with there, or it wasn't sort of pure PHP. We'd sort of like borderline, like I'd throw a few sort of things in the mix. And one of them was on Golang, and I think Golang is very relevant to the PHP community because there's so many roles open right now. The big one that always springs to mind is back-end and microservice engineering at Monzo, the UK starter bank, challenger bank, or whatever they want to call them. It's a lot of Golang roles, but they'll hire senior PHP devs, and they'll actually cross-train them because there's a lot of that kind of crossover readability like Python with Golang, except you've got your sort of crazy async routines and stuff like that. And so he did a Golang talk, but what he did is he studied how 16-bit era games consoles, how the developers got around development problems with creating games, and he recreated the chemical plant Zone 1 from Sonic 2 from the Mega Drive in pure Golang. And it worked. Wow. And he showed it, and it was amazing. I just went, "How did you do this?" We've had some other ones as well. Someone created an entire 3D chess game entirely in CSS. That was amazing. That was mind blowing.
That's amazing. The most left field thing. I mean, I've built an Instagram printer using PHP before, but the one that still blows my mind. I'm going to share my screen because I know we were talking about this one too. Is you can there's an actual like library in the PHP docs just geared around making music or making WAV files, aka making music with PHP, the OpenAL audio bindings, which Rasmus actually worked on, the creator of PHP, like in its early days. I don't think he does now, but I used this once at a conference. Like I made music with PHP from a zero invoice from their API, just because you can. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can.
I think the innovation that you get out of things like this. I mean, what this is making me think of is the infamous story that Aphex Twin won a competition in the 80s for getting, I think it was a Spectrum or a Commodore, I can't remember which one, to make music out of it, but just through the circuitry. And what he did was he sort of overloaded some of the processes to get them to make different frequencies. And I just thought, first of all, that's an Aphex Twin thing to do. And secondly, he's basically making something that doesn't make sound, which was absolutely mad. And so, I mean, this kind of the audio bindings here just makes me think of it. I mean, the question is not it's like that Jurassic Park thing, isn't it? Your scientists were so preoccupied whether they could, they didn't stop to think about whether they should.
Whether they should, yeah.
And I think this sort of runs into. There is a brilliant one. There is a brilliant project, right? If you put it in the search bar now, actually, if you get your screen open, I didn't know about this until recently. I bet you've heard of this. PHP GTK. You can do stuff with PHP because it's almost it's not really a scripting language anymore, really, is it? It's a general purpose programming language. So why not desktop apps? So someone has actually written a whole library that enables you to use the GTK widget toolkit if you've got a Linux flavor. I mean, it's not what I'd use, but it's there.
That is I've seen on I think Android's got an emulator of sorts that lets you do something similar to this too. But this is interesting.
I don't know. The only thing I don't know is how well maintained it is. So I haven't seen when it's its last kind of commit is. Is there a link to the source?
I can't. There's a mailing list. Maybe source. There we go. It was right there. It's in bold, and I missed it.
It is hosted on GitHub. Try typing it into GitHub, and I reckon you get it. I don't know what that shows how. Maybe it's not maintained if the docs are that old. There it is.
Okay, it's actually GTK buttons. That's the one.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
It has actually been marked as.
Yeah, it's having a little lie down at the moment. But if anyone out there wants to start contributing to it, it's here.
There was native. I remember seeing when my wife started picking up Python and started playing with it, and she was doing this thing that she got from a book, and I went, "What? Why is this running natively?" And she was like, "I don't know." And it was and I didn't realize that you could sort of transpile native Python apps into sort of desktop apps. I can't remember if it was Windows or it was Ubuntu or something like that. And that's what made me find this, when I thought, I wonder if someone's tried to do this in PHP and there's this. I mean, your argument really is what's the point? Just do a web app, but it's there.
Well, I guess something else we've been talking about recently is it's a language that is 28 years young now. So I know we've seen it evolve a lot from I started using it during PHP 4 days, and shout out to Laurent on the live stream too, because he's also pointed out that this is similar to the Electron counterpart for JS is the GTK stuff, which is totally true. This was PHP's attempt at doing an Electron type thing.
I didn't actually think of that, but that's that. Yeah, it basically is, isn't it? Maybe it was faster than Electron.
Well, and something. Oh, wait! Oh, this is going to get a reaction when the stream catches up. This is actually a good point. Actually, on that note, I did say that I had a surprise planned for you, and just before we go to the next bit, because I want to talk about one of the new PHP 8 sort of functions. Is one of the things I noticed no one had actually done yet is a chroma key PHP elephant. So, it's actually being blocked by my name. So here is one. Now, this is on open source. We all love open source. I've contributed this back on my YouTube, and if anyone wants it, please go get it because you can download it. And anyway, it's just chroma keyed in. I made this. I made this just for this live stream because I've always wanted to get a PHP elephant in my scene. But yeah, one of the things I was reading about today, I'm going to share my screen back again, and I guess this also talks to the robustness of the language. Is the new PHP Fibers looks super interesting. Have you you've done some work with this recently?
It was the first article after I joined the Vonage team. I wanted to cover something async because as a PHP developer I started about sort of 10 years plus, I think. I started about 2010, so 12 years. First of all, asynchronous stuff is completely alien to me, and my node dev like development is still super poor. When I don't think in functional programming terms. I just think like a classic PHP dev doing everything in sort of like in procedural. Oh, I say procedural. I mean, runtime procedural, not go-to 10. Let's not do go-tos. And so asynchronous stuff is. I'd started sort of hearing about Swool at the time, quite a few years ago now, I think, and then React PHP, and I never really sort of got it. And I thought, what I'm going to do for my first Vonage article is I'm going to have a look at Fibers, because people are starting to talk about Fibers. I have done an article. If I put the
I can share it in the.
I'm just gonna find the link to it. There we go. It was experimental, right? So I've just put it in the private. If you want to whack it up. It was an experimental library, and it's called Revolt PHP. I didn't know what Revolt PHP really was, and it's an event loop library, and it's written by it's an experimental project that's a cross between that's a crossover of the AMP PHP people and the React PHP people. I thought that it was like a sort of a library in order to be able to actually do async PHP, but it's not. It uses Fibers under the hood, but like Fibers themselves, this article was kind of a discovery. So the article is not true. It's not actually true async, but it does show you an example of how you would use the event loop. So you actually have this nightmare of non-blocking stuff from the start. In order to get around the non-blocking stuff, you need a asynchronous framework to do it, and there are 3 of them, and they are the things that are using Fibers under the hood now, right? So don't try. It's interesting to look at Fibers, but it's not. It's designed for framework library developers, not for actual developers of like, I'm just going to make this one thing async. It doesn't really work like that, and the actual implementation of it is super, super difficult in code practice, or at least I find it difficult. It might not be it might be difficult for everyone, but what sort of happened with this journey is in PHP 5.6, generators were introduced, and when generators were introduced, everyone realized, well, hang on a minute, that means that we can actually introduce coroutines from the implementation, and that's where coroutines started, and AMP PHP and React PHP started. And now Fibers are actually native, and it enables you to, if you look at the sort of the API of how you actually create promises for everything in event loop, and then pause stuff, and it dispatches the runtime to where it's needed most. It's absolutely mind-boggling. I'll tell you what, a really good example, if I can find it, sort of good shout out to someone in the Laravel ecosystem actually here.
Oh, good thing you mentioned that too, because we got not only do we have a question on that, I want to talk about the documentary that just came out. But anyway, sorry, go on.
So Marcel Piso, I probably got his surname wrong. Sorry, Marcel. He created a thing. So people are like, if you want to think of the where is like this going? Where is this async stuff in PHP? What can you do with it? I've got Marcel from his company Beyond Code. Actually, if I put this in comment? Oh, I can.
Yeah.
Oh no, but I'm not logged in. Oh, sorry, I've had to put it in private chat again. Marcel's Beyond Code had created something called Invoker, and Invoker under the hood uses React PHP, and it's a prime example of what can I do with something like React PHP. And the example is this is a raw PHP only ngrok, and it's super easy to use. And because it uses under the hood, it uses Fibers. It means that it's super quick when you want to fire off loads and loads of open connections. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So I watched Marcel sort of demoing it. I was like, really? Can you do that? And the answer is yes, you can.
That's interesting, because normally I do the PHP local server and then tunnel that through to ngrok and then do the ngrok running. So this just does like everything all in one.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
so yeah, super,
really
super.
cool.
So to hook it up to Symfony or to Laravel, pretty straightforward.
Pretty easy.
Just takes like an extra app layer. I mean, don't be wrong, Ngrok is absolutely awesome, but
yeah,
we are talking security. So I wonder if Ngrok would pop up at some point about, yay, let's just open up my machine.
Yeah, that's come up. Oh well, that's come up not so long ago in some VS Code plugins, but which are still like the most scariest demo I ever did last year. But anyway, and funny you should mention Laravel too, because and I know we're talking about this recently, but Laravel Documentary just came out, and like I've watched it, and it's like really well produced, really well done. The team behind this, like shout out to them, because it sort of does the community, the Laravel community justice on like just capturing them as a community and their origins, which I think, well, is the name of the actual documentary. But I think they were really well in putting it together. And Laravel, of course, has been one of those PHP frameworks which have been around for like many, many years now, or a number of years now. And amazing community grown up around it, which actually brings us to one of the questions we've had in our chat, which is I'm trying to work out how to ask this without doing the whole framework versus framework. But what's your take on Laravel versus Symfony? Is the question.
It's a well, what the way to answer that is I could just say it depends, right? But that's just too much of a cop out. So I did mention this in the Vonage team. The Vonage team went to PHP UK, which is really the sort of the first post-COVID larger conference that we've had. Really, I think there's a couple of JS ones coming up, and it was a bit kind of, the attendance was a bit down. It was a bit kind of, everyone was not a little bit nervous, but it was a bit kind of like it was just a bit more sparse. And I wrote up that our attendance, right. And one of the things I wrote on was the Sensio Lab teams were there, and I spoke to the Sensio team for quite a while. And one of the things that I spoke about, that we chatted about, was the same question: is Laravel versus Symfony and things like this. The way to think of it, I as a sort of a community advocate, I am massively passionate about this. And also, my first ever talk my first ever tech talk was a culture talk, and it was on tech shaming, elitism in tech, gatekeeping, the sort of the nightmare that's Reddit PHP sometimes, and sometimes just you can't help having toxic stuff. So I'm going to say that the start of my answer is never ever pit one framework against the other and say this one is better, because it's just a stupid thing to say, and it makes you look naive if you do it. And also, what is really, really key is that between Fabien Potentier and Taylor Otwell, the two of them, with Laravel and Symfony, have pushed PHP they basically brought it into this decade, and have kept PHP relevant. And it makes the people that do sort of your classic kind of like lol PHP, or someone who references the Fractal of Bad Design post from like 12 years ago, which isn't even relevant anymore, and even arguably at the time was a big moan about things that sometimes were just a bit fiddly and like, if you want to do a big critique of like this, JavaScript's evolution is exactly the same as PHP's, right? It's almost the same year, isn't it? It's 95, and it's two things born out of necessity that have just chugged on and have kept on going and have been reinvented by the people that maintain them. So those communities that both Laravel and Symfony have created, and the open source aspect of it, and the fact that Laravel takes Symfony components, and the fact that Otwell himself contributes back to Symfony code, it's just like, just use what's best for you. But and I think it comes down. Normally people classically say it comes down to Laravel is better for faster prototyping and MVP, and Symfony is better for the enterprise and for something at scale up. But a common thing that people used to say is that Laravel doesn't scale. Laravel doesn't scale if you don't do it right. If you want to create a Symfony app and you write it and it's a complete load of rubbish, and and all of your caching is all over the place, then that won't scale either. So really, I think it boils down to your preference of the style of how it works. That Laravel is possibly sort of more opinionated and has got that kind of Rails approach to it, and Symfony's got the more sort of Spring and Django kind of heritage to it, and both are really nice ways of working with it. But from a security aspect, I mean, for a classic example is that Laravel used to use PHP Mailer. I think it was PHP Mailer, and interestingly, it had a security bug that I discovered recently, and also actually Steve mentioned to me just before going on this, and so Laravel, without any sort of big discussion about it, pulled it out and put Symfony Mailer instead. Under the hood, Laravel's Mailer is Symfony Mailer. There's no argument for what's better. They all use each other's components. So I like both, and being the PHP developer advocate of Vonage means that I have to represent the PHP community. So, I'm doing some WordPress dev at the moment. Sometimes I do prototypes in Symfony, sometimes I do in Laravel. That article that you just saw used Slim, which is brilliant for really small kind of proof of concept stuff. I like all flavors.
Oh, that's the one. There's so many tabs open. No, amazing answer. Also, just going to put this in here too. I'm not one for statistics, but when it's in favor of one of my favorite languages, I'm totally in favor of statistics. But yeah, there we go. This is Wappalizer. So Wappalizer does detection. Well, they do an in-browser thing and let you see an in-browser plugin that lets you see what stack a particular, or a guesstimate, if you will, on what stack that site's using. And oh, look, PHP 12 million websites tracked. So there we go. But I think that, yeah, it's totally still the most popular language, or one of the most popular languages.
I think with the sort of the future of how this looks, and I've always sort of maintained this for a couple of years of this is what's going to be is point number one. Stop saying PHP is going to die. It's not going to die. It's just not going to go away. If you think it was, it might around before PHP 7 and the dreadful performances of sort of 5.6. Before PHP 7 came along and Nikita really just sort of really upped the ante, and also they had to because of Hip Hop Virtual Machine and Hack with Facebook really sort of taking it on. Before that, PHP looked like it was probably going to die, and then it has such a mature community of people that it just won't die. So just accept that it won't die. And secondly, because of Symfony and Laravel, those are the reasons why it just won't die. What will happen is with WordPress, that figure will slowly get that you could easily from critics of people that are critical of it, critical of the language, will basically say, yeah, but it's just WordPress installs, right? But what will happen is, eventually over time, PHP will shrink and shrink and shrink, but it will shrink, but it will be the people that will be doing it will be doing things exclusively in those mature large scale frameworks like Symfony and Laravel. So it will just be in par with other languages, really.
Yeah. And sort of going back to, I agree. And you always hear that people go, but that's just like 70% of the WordPress installs. And you're like, yeah, but it's still used on so much of the backends. The PHP Mailer one, I've been tracking this one for some time, and I actually never realized I've got this built into the PHP Goof demo on the Snyk Labs site. And for me, as a PHP dev, understanding the vulnerabilities that appear at a more granular code level is always super interesting, because being able to avoid the vulnerabilities for me is understanding how they work and how the exploit works, or how the particular vulnerable piece of code works. This one was really interesting. So I've got the code example. Wait, let me make that a bit bigger. So the way that this particular one works, and there's a few vulnerabilities that have surfaced over the last few years, particularly with the PHP Mailer library. But this one in particular is a vulnerability in the validate address or validate email address function inside the PHP Mailer framework. And basically, it will actually call, even without you referencing it, it will call anything with PHP in the PHP global namespace. So this here, for example, I've just got it set to do a database query, but this function is not called anywhere else until you click the function that, or the function inside the framework that validates the email address, and then it will instantly call anything with PHP Global in it, which I just like. Wait, where's my? I have a mind blow emoji. I have a.
Is it the coming out the head? Is it that one?
Yeah,
that's the one.
Which when I like sort of dug into it and realized what it was doing was just like,
which is a perfect time, surely, to hit the soundboard.
Oh yeah, wait, hang on, I've got a look over there, and you can all see it, but good call.
Horror.
The first time, yeah. But this is one of those sort of vulnerabilities that you don't necessarily realize is hiding inside a framework or inside a library, and you unsuspectingly use this function that then, well, I mean, you can kind of exploit that because you're relying on user input into a function that then calls a PHP global inside a framework. You're like, oh no, here be dragons.
And that is why Laravel took it out and put in Symfony Mailer. But
yeah,
when it comes to open attack vectors, yes, they have taken out PHP Mailer. How many installs are left on the web where you've got like, you know, when you've got what's that XKCD where you've got like a load of boxes, and then there's one box and it's a tiny thing propping up everything, and it's an open source project that thanklessly maintained by someone in Nebraska since 2003. You've got that problem where, you know, we can't upgrade because, you know, it takes because our servers can't handle it, or blah blah blah, or the database will fall over, and then you've got people left with that library.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we saw something similar with the Log4j from the Java ecosystem, right before the holiday break at the end of the year. PHP Mailer's got 29 million installs, which, like you said, it was part of frameworks for so long, including, I think WordPress was using it for a while too, from memory, or at least part of the WordPress framework as well. But yeah, it's definitely been integrated into a number of projects since when did it come into effect? Last update. I thought it might have had.
I can't even begin to imagine the kind of the kind. I mean, that's a pretty bad vulnerability. But on the level of kind of log4j, I can't imagine something like like a monologue. Like something like monologue getting like or one of the other logger interfaces that one of the other logger libraries that uses the PSR interface. But I can't imagine the same scenario in PHP if monologue got it, because how many installs has monologue got? I mean, that's used by everything. Yeah. So let's just keep our fingers crossed there's no vulnerabilities in it.
Yeah, and I mean, another reason to make sure everyone's scanning everything ongoing, because these things, I mean, one of the things I always do is check and I talk about this a lot, is the vulnerability database, like literally over my morning coffee, to see what new ones have appeared. Also, what ones I can add to my Goof project. So if anyone's got any good ones, like, please let me know, because I always love collecting them inside the demo app. Which at the moment only has 2. PHP Mailer is one of them, but yeah, they're always looking for more. The whoops, wrong one.
I think what's a sort of a dangerous aspect of that's specific to PHP is what used to be its kind of barrier to entry. I mean, lots of people used to say like, oh, the reason why PHP is so bad and the reason why JavaScript is so bad is because the barrier to entry is so low. I mean, if anyone's saying that the barrier to entry is low for JavaScript, especially Node these days, like you're wrong. It's so difficult to get into. I mean, the actual like Node ecosystem is scary. But it's the same kind of thinking in the PHP ecosystem that I get the feeling that the large amounts of more entry-level PHP devs, especially coming into WordPress development, are not going to know about things like continuous integration. They're not going to know about pipelines, but things like, getting GitHub Actions to do like that. WordPress, you haven't really got Composer baked in. Bearing in mind, I didn't know any of this until I started coding a WordPress plugin for Vonage, which I'm doing right now, which incidentally is for two-factor authentication using our Verify API. So I started coding in WordPress the first time ever, and I looked at it and went, Oh, okay. So I can't really use Composer. I have to literally download this thing.
Oh,
I
so
didn't. I went to Docker to go to the Docker images, right? But
oh
so
yeah.
what scares me is that I think that a lot of PHP devs, won't know necessarily about Snyk, for instance. And really, it's kind of vital to be on the ball to to be running something like Snyk in your pipelines. And let's be honest. I don't work for you, but I am going to shill for you a little bit that it really is the sort of go-to tool when it comes to sort of vulnerabilities and scanning your source code. But so the kind of stuff that you're adding into the projects, especially with WordPress vulnerabilities and with it being the ecosystem where its own community are having to fight its users so much to try and get them to upgrade, and they've had limited success with Jetpack. It scares me.
There is actually, I've counted at least 3 unofficial WordPress Composer projects. Well, I'm going to call them unofficial, but this is probably one of the more popular ones. And I actually saw this appear in, this is to install WordPress core. So 5.6 million installs. But there was a vulnerability in this that actually appeared about a week ago. And I saw even Automatic put out an alert for it, including 5 plugins that they were saying, if you're using these, like, upgrade, because, bad things. Which I just thought was interesting. But I kind of wish they would release an official WordPress core, like, Composer supported version, because this is just a community.
I did see from a bit of background research a couple of weeks ago that it's been a sort of a huge talking point within the community between Automatic and also Human Made. That's sort of one of the biggest agencies that would use the WordPress people. Of like, is WordPress a framework? Should it use Composer? It's not really, but WordPress core sort of is, and things like that. So it's a big sort of talking point. But on touching on the plugin system, when I started coding that plugin, I just what was going through my head is, this is the way that you extend off WordPress by creating a plugin is super, super scary when it comes to attack vectors, really, of allowing you have this, you don't have things like the inversion of control and the service level container like you have in things like I don't know. The only thing that's a bit Wild West is Drupal. I've never actually touched it, but I think we might be going to DrupalCon. I might be writing a plugin for Drupal next month actually. But when it comes to sort of Slim and Laravel and Symfony and things like that, you've written. It's got a container system, and and it hands over control, then it brings it back and things like that. WordPress, just because it's become this sort of enormous beast, it just doesn't work like that. Everything is hooks, and it doesn't have a life cycle. The life cycle is whenever your plugin is loaded and hooks into it, whether that's before a plugin, whether it's after a plugin. So I was coding this and just thinking, well, how easy would it be to download somebody else's plugin, or if I discovered that someone else was using that plugin on their site, and I pretty much created a plugin and tried to get it installed on their system or encourage them to install it, and it basically just creates an open hole and gives me access, because I'm seeing plugins where you have a hook which is on install. So you have this header in the plugin, and then you install it, and it goes, right, there's a hook for when you install it. What are you going to do? And you don't have a migration system if you want to do anything in the database. You write raw SQL, and I'm like, well, okay, that's a problem. So I can sort of put any sort of raw SQL into that plugin, and then say, hey, download my thing. My app doesn't do any of the things that it says it does, but what it does do is it injects like malicious code into your database. When are you going to check it? You're a WordPress user. Are you actually going to check the source code or not? It's scary, man. It's scary.
Yeah, actually, interestingly, I've seen. Yeah, interesting you should mention that, because I've seen some sort of established, seasoned, almost industry standard frameworks like Magento, for example, sort of close that ecosystem loop with a lot of their plugins and extensions to try and mitigate that whole security of having reviews for plugins, like having a more stringent gate control, if you will, before anything can make it onto. You can install it through our mechanism store rather than the whole. Just submit it and it's then available for everyone.
It's easy to criticize people like that criticize WordPress for having things that open, but at least it's good. It's good news to hear that Drupal and Magento are taking steps to really curb this. But these CMS systems, when they were built, have just gone way beyond the scope of what they were built for. And you've got to have hats off to the Automatic team for really having to tame what is, and things like the WooCommerce team. I spoke to some of the core team at WooCommerce, and what they built on top of WordPress is just an absolute monster to maintain, and they still do it, and they still make it. They still got the core WordPress team themselves. It's not like they don't know what they're doing. They know exactly where the problems are. It's just, how do you go balancing, like, trying to close security loopholes whilst having 70% of the internet using your platform? It's almost an impossible, thankless task.
I don't know. You've probably been in a similar situation too, like over the years as a dev through your developer origin story too. But I always think of it as changing a car engine while you're driving it. So,
yeah, exactly. That is a really, really good analogy. That.
Trying to upgrade, and like you say, like, hats off to the Automatic crew and the WordPress, the WooCommerce crew, because they've managed to. Backwards compatibility is a big thing in any framework, but trying to sort of bring people over in that journey. And of course, we see the amazing folks at Drupal trying to manage that all the time. That whole migration from version to version. Bring everyone along for the ride, and manage to add new functionality, but not make it so you don't have to reinvent wheels, so to speak. Oh, so many car analogies tonight. I don't know why. Not have to reinvent the entire website over again, but be able to port everything across as best as possible. I remember even going, what version of WordPress are we on now? Is that 6 or something? The early days of 2 to 3, and everyone was breaking all these sites, and like plugins weren't in the spot that everyone was expecting, and there was so many bits falling out of the engine, so to speak, just trying to get people across
picking
versions.
up the bits as you go.
Picking up the bits. It was tricky, and then with any project though, like that whole version control piece is always tricky. Funny you should talk about Drupal, because I know PHP containerization. I actually have a blog post coming out with this. This should be this month. But is something I've been looking at, and I spoke at a bunch of sort of Drupal camps last year. Amazing community. I shout out to their security team and just the community in general. Like, there's ongoing sprint sessions they run globally. If you want to get involved, you can, because the community there is amazing. And
it's a community I haven't actually I haven't come across. I will do now in my role at Vonage. Hi Ben, Ben's here. The community team at Vonage is so it's a necessity really of looking into the Drupal ecosystem for the first time. And like I said, I think we might be going to DrupalCon in Poland. Coming up. I've never been to one, and everyone that I've spoken to in the PHP ecosystem has really sort of rated it as a really welcoming, fun community of devs to be in. So I'm looking forward to that.
No, they're absolutely amazing. One of my favorite. Totally one of my favorite. They're all my favorite, but anyway, I'm going to say one of my favorite groups. And their sprints and contribs sessions are always great, just to see people turning up wanting to fix bugs and like whatever else pops up. I have been scanning a few of these lately, even the Docker PHP image base images as well. And one of the things I've always found interesting, and again, like, make sure you scan your infrastructure and where you're running your code and whatnot, but just seeing some vulnerabilities appear in like some of the images always just, I always find interesting. Actually, the PHP one has gotten a lot better since in the last few months. So hats off to whoever's updating that, because that is really cool to see. That is good to see.
One of the kind of frustrations, one of the frustrations I sort of see in PHP in general is the willingness of major software vendors to be interested in it or support it, and there's a couple of things that spring to mind. First of all, like a real bugbear, and this is like a bee in my bonnet, right? And this is not going to be the same for everyone, but honestly, Apple saying that PHP is legacy out of the box is a really going to be professional, not going to swear, but would have sworn, because that's just not a cool thing to do. It's turning away people from an ecosystem, but also it's from a security perspective, it's just making people think that an entire programming language is unsafe, and that's just not cool. Another one is Canonical. Canonical, if you want to, if you're not using Docker and you want a PHP version out of the box, and you're using Synaptic, the apt. If you want to use apt-get PHP 8.1, that's very true point. It's still the repository is a PPA private repository from, and it's not maintained. It's not an official canonical repository for a major programming language, and it's maintained by one bloke, Andre, who's is a bloke in the Czech Republic. Why is a single person having to? That means that he has to, in terms of the security vulnerability. I'm not going to diss him, because it's one person doing a job single-handedly. Yeah. But it's all, the emphasis is all on him. So the images that he's building. What happens if he makes a mistake when building it? What if one of the ini files isn't set correctly, and then millions of people that actually use Linux and rely on building, if they want to have quite a manual kind of PHP build, what if it just comes in there? So, I mean, I could go on with things like this. Amazon is a classic example. I mean, just Amazon, like AWS, just are not interested in PHP runtimes, and they just aren't. And I just find that sort of astonishing. And maybe it's just because, like, oh well, why are we going to support lambdas in PHP properly if, like, no one uses it? What, you mean all the millions of people that really would want it?
Like 79% of the internet, yo. Yeah, and I think that's it's a really good point too. And it's something we see across a lot of some of the open source ecosystem when it comes to vulnerabilities too. Is there'll be this delay between like the original CVE being raised or bug being raised, and then there's a time delay between the fix getting deployed. And it's either going to be a number of things, which is, well, there's only one or two people working on it, or there's debate in the community as to whether, like, it is actually a vulnerability, like maybe it was meant to be that way, but hey, we need to add this thing. Like, you see that time delay sometimes with these vulnerabilities being patched or these bugs being patched. So anyone like that is using a particular library, like, please help out, get involved, always contribute back where you can. Everyone will thank you for it. We already do. We're going to thank you in advance.
Yeah, I'm in awe at some of the things within our ecosystem that get maintained. Like, talking of Andre, the other Andre is the one that created PHP Stan, and to have static analysis that is that advanced on PHP that effectively compiles your code if you want to do it in your CI pipeline is astonishing. That we have these things that people have created. It really is.
Let's see what we were going to talk about. The only other thing I wanted to talk about is, have you used Unserialized before? I'm going to say one of the most forbidden of PHP functions, which I don't think should be in 8, but anyway, that's controversial and debatable.
Yeah, I think I haven't looked at sort of what the deprecation plan was, but in the Vonage PHP SDK. So for anyone that doesn't know what it is, it's the library for using Vonage. If you want to use Vonage for SMS stuff in your app, or use bots with WhatsApp support and Viber and things like that, or you want to use the automated voice system. We've also got video in the APIs now as well. In that, so that SDK is what, as the PHP advocate, is what I've inherited. So quite a lot of the way that the model layer of that library under the hood, not in user land bit, not the user facing bit, but you've got the sort of service layer and then what's under the hood. Originally, they had unserialized functions on them. I've got to say that until that point, I hadn't looked at serialized and unserialized, and I just thought when I'm looking into it, I was like, I don't understand what the point is of this. But then I looked at what unserialized did, and then I scrolled down and just went, this is probably the biggest security vulnerability of the PHP programming language.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. In fact, there's for anyone that hasn't used it, if you are using it, just please don't. But basically,
yeah. Oh, you're about to outline what it is. But I was basically about to go through like what it does. But
I'm going to make this bigger just so everyone can see it, because don't use it. Yeah, basically you can, a malicious actor can basically store an entire or inject an entire PHP function inside your framework, inside serialize. And then when you bring that stored data stream back out through unserialized, yeah, bad things happen. So
you've got like a sort of a double-edged sword with that, in that the method of unserialized is unsafe, and then the implementation for anyone that is used unserialized is probably passing something coming in from the outside world into your app. So it's like, this isn't good. So yeah, don't use that.
This would be a prime candidate or a prime way to inject like a PHP global thing and then call it through something like PHP Mailer, for example, because once it's inside your framework, it just needs to be called or be triggered in some way. So yeah, just please don't use it. JSON decode, JSON encode, as these big red warning says, is totally a much better way. Now, one of the, and I get why they did this, but I wrote a blog post on some time ago now, 6 months ago, so on 5 ways to prevent PHP code injection. And in the research for this, I actually found this memo. So this is from the core PHP team like 4 years ago, basically saying that they're not going to consider any security bugs raised on unserialized anymore because people shouldn't be using it. So I hope it gets removed at some point because it shouldn't be there anymore. But
I imagine,
yeah. Anyway,
I'd have to ask someone on the sort of someone higher up in the PHP Foundation, like sort of like Dan Aykroyd or Derek Rethens or something like that. But I'd probably assume that that one of the goals of the PHP Foundation is probably dealing with just getting this out.
Getting it, yep.
Just pulling it
well,
out.
Again, well, this kind of goes back to what we were saying too, or what we were talking about with the how do you maintain the core framework, because it's been, it's in operation for so long. How do you maintain the core and sort of evolve it with everyone coming along for the ride, so to speak, in that car engine while you're changing it? And it probably is sounding easier than it actually is to try and deprecate some of this stuff out and switch it around. But I always find this one super interesting. And if anyone is using this, just please don't change it over for some sort of either a more secure framework or use JSON. JSON is our friend. Anyway, that's probably all we have time for to this episode. But any shout outs to any podcasts or any upcoming conferences or talks or live streams that you're doing that you wanted to do?
Well, I have got. So I've just given a conference talk at PHP UK on using PHP VCR. That will be up shortly on YouTube if you check the conference YouTube links. But I will also be rolling that out to some user groups. I'm open to any user groups that are doing virtual. Well, anyone's in Europe I could do in person because we're slowly sort of getting them back in person. But if any user groups want to hear it, virtually, as far afield as Australia or the US or whatever, then it's there. I think we've got this. We're slowly seeing PHP events and conferences sort of opening up. So I think we're Midwest PHP is coming up, and DrupalCon is coming up, and we're likely to be at one of those at Vonage. If you want to come and say hello to us all. On my personal turf, it's Fusion Meetup, which I'm really super excited, which I host. That's not a PHP one. That's multi-language. So we've got a bit of MongoDB, we've got a bit of AI, we've got some other sort of cool stuff. We've got some sort of weird motion capture project, which I'm looking forward to seeing what on earth that's about. We host that in person at Birmingham, but it is actually a Fusion. It's a hybrid event, so you can actually get links to that being broadcast out. So yeah, that's on Thursday evening. Shout out to my team for that.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, everyone should totally check those out. And of course, you're on all the socials, as I didn't load your Twitter name in, but I'm going to go grab it now because I tweeted you earlier.
So yeah, I'm at Seconde on Twitter, and also you can also reach us via Vonage Dev, our Vonage developers account. I'm also a regular writer with the rest of the developer relations team on our blog. So for all things cool and PHP related, you can find them on there. One of the things I haven't written on yet is security, which is a prod towards Steve's direction, because he already knows that I want to do this, which is possibly a sort of a Snyk and Vonage kind of crossover thing, where we sort of have a look at stuff, because we're heavily into APIs at Vonage naturally, and APIs have big security red flags all over them. So there's probably some fun stuff we could probably find.
They do. And I love APIs. It's one of my other things that I've built out over the years. Actually using Laravel one time, which was interesting. A total tangent, but I found out when I was doing some Laravel stuff recently, after I watched a documentary, that OpenAPI generator, which generates automatic SDKs from an OpenAPI spec, actually has a Laravel template and a couple of PHP framework templates built in, so you can just straight output a SDK. Which, yeah,
fun fact of the day: I interviewed many years ago. I say many years, but about 4 years ago, for a company called Snyk, who are an API company that I think they've still taken off quite well. They were basically recruiting their first Devrel team, really, because that was the sort of core part of their business. And for the interview, that's exactly what you just described is what I did. I created an API. Cool. I created an API by running a command in Laravel that used the OpenAPI spec to just then generate all the methods. And at that point, it wasn't really sort of baked in at that point. So it was real fun to do that.
That's cool. Before you know it, you're supporting like X number of languages through those automatic generators. No, that's awesome. One question I always love asking, just a final one to wrap up with, is you answered it at the start. Wait, what was your first computer?
No, I didn't answer it. I didn't. I did everything. I think I did just about everything else. We're saying my first computer because we had the family Commodore 64, we had the family Specky, the one that was bought specifically for me when I got into programming, when I got into computers, was a Macintosh Performer 6320, which was part of the family called the Road Apples, because they were so bad and they were cobbled together through basically reserve pieces. So I am actually one of the sort of original Mac fanboys when they were extremely uncool and not very good. But the majority of my programming was either the hacking part of it was using something called ResEdit, which would let you go into resource forks of compiled programming, the compiled things on the Macintosh Programmers Workshop. So I'd then go into the resource fork and then rip it apart just because I could. And then actual programming stuff, I had the video. Do you remember the video game Myst?
Yes. Yeah, I've actually been playing that in VR now.
Oh, okay. I had Myst because it shipped with everything, and I got absolutely fascinated by it. In fact, one of the rings that I've got is my birthday in Duchny Ruins from Riven, from the sequel, with my birthday on it. So I got into programming because I saw Myst and I found out how they made it, and I got into HyperCard. And so my first programming language was Hypertext, which was like a sort of which was like a very, very, very verbose programming language with like black and white things called stacks. It was really before the web, really, HyperCard. It was like hypermedia was sort of just before it, which was really what became sort of the web and HTML. So that was my shtick for that.
Amazing. I always love those stories because I mean it just it always sort of helps describe someone's developer origin story, just where they started and what got them into dev, and it's always just such a varied mix of those origins. So no, thank you for that, and been absolutely amazing talking to you. Been
It's been
really
a pleasure.
cool
Thanks,
geek out session. Thank you.
Thank you very
And
much.
for all those watching, track James down on socials, and we'll see you next episode.